Welcome back to Take a Leap and Transform a Neurodiversity Journey. I'm your host, Joseph K. Muscat. Are you ready to take a leap with me? As we embark on this journey, let me introduce myself as Malta's Neurodiversity Consultant, Joseph K. Muscat. I've been pioneering neurodiversity and awareness within the Maltese business landscape for the past 3 years. During this time, I've engaged in speaking, coaching, conducting workshops with companies and organizations like Betson, Bena, FHRD, Upper Level, and many more. This year marks the introduction of Neurodiversity Week in Malta, where we present insights from incredible guests about neurodiversity in the workplace. So let's now leap into the interview. Awareness and training for neurodiversities are still emerging and growing in the diversity, equality, and inclusion and belonging sphere. In this evolving field, neurodivergency, like myself, are taking the lead as trusted independent businesses, a trend seen in various countries. I'm delighted to be welcomed by Daphne and Dietry, a dynamic couple pioneering this path in Belgium. Daphne and Dietry are both neurodivergents and co-founders of Bian in Belgium, specializing in neurodiversity consulting. Their focus is on training and consulting for neurodivergents at work, emphasizing resilience, productive, and neuro-inclusion teams through innovative approaches and strategies. Welcome, Daphne and Dietry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Joseph. And hi, everybody looking at our live stream.
We can't
Fantastic.
see you. We can't
Yes.
see you. That's not possible. But welcome.
Well, we met over a year ago, and we've developed a really great relationship and bond, and we've been networking together and supporting each other. And it's really great to have you here for this amazing event. And
Thank you for inviting us. Yeah.
my pleasure, guys. My pleasure. Again, this is another way of how we can support one another within our community as both being neurodivergents as well as neurodivergent entrepreneurs in the sphere of bringing neurodiversity awareness towards the workplace.
Yes.
So Daphne and Dietry, we connected just about a year ago, and we've developed our, as I said, friendship and initiation and support and network between us. I mention this because the three of us are all aware of the uphill battle we face since neurodiversity is relatively a new yet old and not fully recognized workplace issue. Can you share your journey with us?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
We started rolling into the scene, more or less, not by accident, I would say, but it was really, maybe a bit by accident. Initially, we started a company, so we both worked in the tech scene for many years. We started a company, so that was actually the first iteration of being a company to provide consulting services to tech startups and scale-ups. So we were active in that scene for a little while, and then at some point, totally unrelated to that, I thought, I would like to start doing public speaking. Because I didn't really engage in that yet, and I wanted to try that out. So Daphne said, why don't you go talk about ADHD? Make a presentation, a short presentation at the local event somewhere about ADHD. I thought, okay. It was actually a stressful moment. I really had to complete it at the last moment because, I'm an ADHD person, so we both have ADHD and autism. But anyway, I created a talk on ADHD and software development, ADHD developer. And then I presented that, so that was actually a presentation of 20 minutes, I think, maximum. That was a fun thing to do for the first time. Then later on, some companies, some people came to us and asked us, hey, do you provide consulting for neurodiversity or for ADHD? In the workplace. And I was like, no, not really, no, we don't really do that. I don't perceive me or ourselves as experts back then. So, but we kind of did, we did sell the presentation, and we did give the presentation. Actually, we got very good feedback, we got very good reactions to that. And then we started thinking, okay, being neurodivergent ourselves, being having been busy leading teams in the past in various companies, and then experience of being neurodivergent ourselves, yeah, we were thinking maybe that's a better path for us.
It was closer
Yeah.
to us and it gave us a lot of energy as well. And then we started to do research and getting to know a lot more about neurodiversity and decided to do like a switch actually towards neurodiversity consulting. And yeah, we did that I think a year and a half ago. And around a year ago, we started to have our first customers buying the keynote, buying the workshops. Some customers in the Netherlands as well, asking for the consulting. Yeah, and it's still an ongoing thing, because in Belgium we're still in the awareness journey around neurodiversity. While, for example, in the Netherlands, there are already employee resource groups that really support their company with consulting and ambassadors. So we get a lot more requests from the Netherlands at this point. Yeah.
So a big part is really going to speak for free. So we go to speak for free at events, non-profit events or public events and stuff like that. That's really getting the word out. That's the most important still in Belgium.
Yeah.
So, thank you for sharing that. And it's really interesting, you made the comparison between the Netherlands and Belgium. So Netherlands have ambassadors, Netherlands have employee resource groups. Is that kind of concept just starting, or it's already pre-existing in Belgium, but they haven't looked into going into supporting neurodivergence yet?
Yeah. Often they already have employee resource groups or like diversity, equity, and inclusion groups or committees, but they're not yet aware about neurodiversity in Belgium. So they're getting aware now about it, and they're trying to create some more awareness in the company. However, in comparison with Netherlands, there are really groups focused purely on neurodiversity underneath another group focusing on inclusion, actually. And that's, a very significant difference between both countries. And you can see that this week as well on LinkedIn and in the press as well. While the Netherlands, like today, it was an explosion of posts of companies doing something about neurodiversity this week, while in Belgium it's super quiet.
Why? Go ahead, sorry.
The groups in Holland, that's how we perceive it. They get more buy-in already from senior management. They get budgets. That is not yet the case in Belgium. So we have contact with a few people from that run ERGs, and usually the budget is getting a budget for speakers and for events. That's still an issue. So they're really still also busy with selling the idea to senior management and to the board. So we are still earlier.
And we're helping them in that as well by talking for associations where actually HR responsibles are a member, or like the C-levels are members. And they are interested about it. They just weren't aware of it. They never heard of neurodiversity. And it's when we direct to the senior levels and the HR, they're more interested actually to book a workshop or a keynote. So
yeah, that's something. Yeah, they're moving something, but I find the same similar challenges here in Malta. It's still in its infancy, despite the fact they've been at it for 3 years. The interest is starting to pick up. The concept of ERGs is still a very new concept. There's only about 2 or 3 that I'm aware of companies that have employee resource groups. And even the concept of funding employee resource groups is still a very new idea. I know in North America, funding is one of the major things that ERGs are constantly fighting for, and some get it, some don't, are having to prove that. And it's interesting as well because, Netherlands and Belgium, if I got my geography correct, is really close together, yet one is very far ahead in the awareness and the activity that they're doing with ERGs and neurodiversity. Yeah, Belgium is it. Is there a particular reason why? Is it a cultural thing or?
Could be. It's actually for most of the things, like in technology as well. We come from the tech industry. In technology, we see that as well, that the Netherlands are often a bit further than Belgium. Yeah, further ahead. And for example, the UK are mostly the first, or at least UK and Germany mostly. Yeah. If it comes to tech, really. Yeah.
But I think it's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
I think by nature, people from Belgium or Flemish people are more hesitant
Yeah.
to pick up new things and
More
more
afraid of taking risks.
being risk averse.
Yeah.
And what about then, when we talk about neurodiversity, again, just to give a cultural context here, when we talk about neurodiversity from a Belgian point of view, we know that there's been a history of stigma. Is the stigma and in that reservation some of the barriers that you are currently facing in bringing that awareness where there's interest, but they're not willing to jump on it right away?
Yeah, I think that has a big role. And actually, we do know people in companies and sometimes senior leaders, or sometimes even CEOs or from the C-suite that we know are neurodivergent. What we feel, the feeling that we have is that a lot of these people are very hesitant to speak out about it.
Yeah.
Because of the stigma, because of afraid of taking the risk that it will have a negative effect on
That
the
they will
company.
perceive differently.
And afraid of facing discrimination. But really, it's a chicken and egg problem. It keeps itself in motion. So yeah.
But there are some pioneers like us speaking about it, and other people are speaking up as well. So it's an evolution we have to go through, speaking about the stigmas, explaining that they're not true, that they're prejudices, and that actually the risk that you take as a company is much lower than the benefits that you get from it. The added value from having a neurodiverse team is super valuable, and it's something that you need if you want to be a future-proof company.
Yeah. Very, very true. And it's interesting, again, it's a universal thing in regards to the fears of acknowledging and identifying yourself as being neurodivergent, particularly when you're even in a higher position. And and you're right about the chicken and egg aspect, but also there is also a bit of hypocrisy, because when those individuals who do come out, they come out when they are at a higher position, because now they feel safe that they've accomplished it, in spite of. And it's like, what about the people who are down below them, where, they're not in that position to come out? And what are you doing to lead the way where it's safe for them to come out where they are, not having to be at the top?
Yeah.
And lastly, in this area, you mentioned at the end that there's now more people starting to speak up. How is that movement? You said in regards to, you said that more people are speaking up. So are you starting to see more consultants coming up, more people being more open about it?
Well, there are more companies like us, indeed, getting established, so that's also a good thing. But we notice it especially in founder or C-levels talking about it in the press as well and on LinkedIn.
A few.
But it's not that there are many of them, but there's a few, and it makes that it sets some movement, or how to say,
There is a sort of small movement, not specifically within the work environment, but there is a sort of movement going on Instagram, and there's a few Facebook groups as well for people that are neurodivergent, and the Discord community. So when you peek into those areas, you see people starting to gather. together. My English is
No, your English is perfect. Don't worry. I fumbled too, right? So it's
yeah,
okay.
so no, but you see that that's the start of a movement. But yeah, it's not. I don't want an us versus them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want the world that with the regular, normal, quote unquote people, and then the neurodivergent people, they all have their own groups. But it's finding what is the word again? Yeah, you need to find your group, you need to find your tribe.
Mhm.
Then I think in the end, we will end up with people or more people starting to disclose.
Because they feel backed up.
Yeah,
Right,
because
right.
it gets backed up. And then if you have companies like us or foundations that talk about neurodiversity, about it has challenges, but it also has strengths, and it's just a natural thing. It's diversity of the brain, and we don't need to perceive it as a disorder per se. It can be a disorder, but it's not a definition by definition of disorder. Those things. I think the different powers that start to gain traction will at some point, we hope, create a situation similar to the Netherlands, that people will be more open to talk about it.
But also because of the keynotes that we do and the workshops, there are also people within companies that we've spoken to or we went to that became ambassadors as well. For example, one of our customers, 11 Ways, they were already very far in the process of neuroinclusion, but they really are ambassadors for neurodiversity at the workplace. So they speak openly about it and they also inspire others.
So they are the pioneering companies then, not the service providers, but the creative companies and the digital companies.
Yeah, I totally understand that. One of my clients is Betson, and they started the ERG, ERG, and they had an ambassador leading the way. So they're one of the forefront of this, and it starts coming from the speaking engagements that and workshops that I've done for them. So with that all said, I'd like to explore two aspects. First, how is neurodiversity? Oh, well, we already covered that actually in our conversation, so I'll skip that question. So let's go over here. Now let's delve into neurodiversity or neuroinclusion. I'd like to start the conversation by addressing the significance of board level support. And you've mentioned this in the previous conversation, which we emphasized the beginning of Neurodiversity Week Malta. However, both of you seem to have a different perspective on the topic and come from a slightly different where the focus is more on teams. Can you elaborate further on this?
Sure. First of all, having support of your board is super important to start neuro inclusion in the workplace. Why? Because they have the budgets and also they have to set expectations and the goals that you want, the standards, the values, and so on. And also, when it comes to psychological safety, it has to start on a board level, actually. However, if it comes to implementation, what we often hear is companies or HR saying, but if we have to look at everybody's personal needs and personal preferences, that's a lot of work, especially if you're a company of 39,000 people or whatever, we have customers like that. I can imagine, a conversation with each of them is out of the league, of course. But in that case, you can put a framework actually there so that the teams have the mandates to organize them themselves, to look within the team, what are the needs and the strengths that we have within the team, how can we make sure that everybody can work on their strengths, and if they have challenges, how as a team can we make sure that these are either removed or reduced to a low level, actually. And that actually takes away a lot of burden or barrier for the higher level to decide upon that, because it's impossible if you're that big of a company to look at all these different aspects and put it in place for everyone. And it will also not work, because what works for one person will not work for another one.
Yeah. So they need to be on board. The board level needs to be on board with, we need to see and treat neurodiversity not as how was the word I was going to say?
As a disorder.
It's not a disorder, but it's also not an exception. These are not exceptions, so it needs to be ingrained in the culture. That's one thing, and they are very responsible for that. And setting the standards and leading the leading the way, being an example for their people. But a big part of the implementation then, actually the implementation of being really inclusive, what people and teams need to do and managers need to do day in, day out, that's really, in our idea, a matter of descaling. So that's indeed what you were saying. That's sometimes a remark that we get, but we really have to manage all of this. If we have one person with autism, we have a person with ADHD, we have a person with dyslexia, we have a person with OCD. But that's way too much. We already are drowning in work.
And then you still have all the other diversity as well.
So that's too much. It's like, no, we try to go for a universal design, make these small steps, but give the mandate to the teams, because the teams, they
know best.
That's where the work is happening. They know best indeed, and they know which personalities, given
strengths, you're in the team,
and given the psychological safety, they can have the conversations and they can decide eventually with support. There can be support, can be a support system.
Because sometimes indeed we also get to remark, but won't there be like people abusing the fact that they have autonomy? And say, that's why you need to put a framework, of course. And of course there will always be people, maybe to stretch the limits, but there will only be a handful or something.
That's the distrust part.
But that's been with everything in the history that happened, from changes like child labor. They were also afraid of everything that would include that. So,
Well, that's interesting. It's really interesting in the aspect. I mean, first off, I think we need to clarify something here, that neurodivergency is not a disorder, but it's how society and how society structures are currently built that does make it a disorder. Because when we take a look at behavior and the systems, it's designed for one type of diversity. So if it's not designed for someone who's ADHD, then it puts them in a position where it becomes a disorder and they're at a disadvantage, right? So we need to, as you stated earlier, we need to have more universal design principles where it can no longer be seen as a disorder because we've removed those barriers. Until we do that, it's a disorder, unfortunately. And it's also interesting, the aspect, I mean, that's really interesting. The fear of autonomy. Why can you not let the teams have a degree of autonomy? Because that's how they're going to function best, to be able to be more creative, think out of the box, to build that strong teamwork environment. It's quite surprising to hear that there's this fear of autonomy. And what's also interesting as well is that we have to take a look at who's the first tier in the company. The first tier in the company is always the team and the manager before it even gets to the second tier, which is human resources, which then gets to the third tier, which is the employer, board level, whatever the structure is. So it's the manager and the team who always have to deal with it first. And if they don't have the skills and the resources and the framework and mandate to do that, then it becomes that conflict situation that companies want to avoid, where teams tend to break down.
And right now, in almost all the teams, also in teams that we have worked, there sometimes is conflict. Conflict arises, but they don't yet, at this point, even without taking into account neurodiversity, they don't have the tools in many cases to deal with that internally. And that's in a big part of the psychological safety. So the psychological safety, to stress that, it's really, psychological safety is really valuable for the company. It's not just for the people. It has benefits for the people to talk openly about struggles, but it has a very, very big advantage for the company because you detect errors earlier, you can gather feedback more easy. People learn more because they can make mistakes, they can fail and learn from it. But that's a feeling that we have, and I think it's pretty general if we talk to other people as well. There's no really psychological safety is not really a given yet within companies. So when there's conflict internally, it already in many cases needs to be dealt with by HR or by not maybe senior management, but middle management.
So and just a person who is consolidated that you can talk to.
Indeed, account. But then if you add the concept of neurodiversity, then it's even more, and then I think but that's all going to come to us. So that's really giving the teams the tools. It's the safety, it's the tools about being able to give feedback to each other, to have open conversations, to all these kinds of things, and teach them ways to deal with the work. So also, how can we, if you're doing complex problems, complex work, how can we tackle that work? How can we divide that work? How can we work together? So all these things, and that's not in place yet.
So let's break that down a little bit more, if you don't mind, because this is interesting, and I want to get your perspective and what you can share in this aspect. So let's first tackle psychological safety. What for you does, because I mean, psychological safety, again, can sometimes be a very vague word, and particularly when you've just stated that, it's a concept that isn't fully embraced yet. So what does psychological safety, 3 to 4 points, what does that look like to you?
If you summarize it, it's being able to speak freely without the fear of I'm going to get a negative effect from this. So, for example, when you make when you make a mistake in your work, people now tend to not be very open about that because they fear, this is going to have a negative effect on my performance. So it's
and it's also not about being nice to everyone. It's also about being able to say respectfully if somebody is triggering you as well, that you can speak that out, and there are no frictions living under the hood or something.
So that's indeed the interpersonal aspects, and that I think is very important for neurodiversity. And diversity in general, to be able to speak freely, but the most essential, that's actually the essential definition of psychological safety is it creates learning environments, because teams and people dare to speak up about things that they see, this is going wrong, or I saw a mistake, or we forgot something, or I saw my manager make a mistake, for example. A manager, a person that has power, that has it's the manager, it's the senior in the team, that person may have made a mistake, or I think I saw a mistake somewhere, but I'm not going to speak up about it because that's going to be not good for my career. But that's really hindering companies, that's hindering teams, and we actually need to be able to share those things, those feedback, those ideas, those if you see an error somewhere, and being able to do that, that company, that team is going to learn much more quickly and going to deal with issues much faster and going to innovate more. And actually, there's research around diversity, also from Amy Edmondson. So Amy Edmondson is the person who wrote the book, the professor from Harvard, I think.
Okay.
There's a research paper, if you compare a homogeneous team, so we have a lot of people with the same profiles, without psychological safety, the homogeneous team compared to a diverse team, the homogeneous team will perform better.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the barriers in between the people and the communication differences.
I think you got that mixed up. Not the homogeneous team, the diverse team, because I've read the same studies. The diverse team that has the more diverse the team is, they tend to outperform homogeneous teams.
Yeah, but it's only if there's psychological safety.
Right. Okay.
Not yet.
Without psychological safety, it's the other way around. The homogeneous team performs better. So, and then they discovered with psychological safety, the diverse team is actually going to outperform.
Yeah,
the homogeneous team.
30% more productive actually. And they did the same research with neurodiverse teams this year actually. And they saw that it even had a bigger effect if the team had several ways of thinking, because the group think was actually broken, how to say. So there were more innovative thoughts and so on.
Yeah, because you know, a good leader, a good manager would allow for teams to speak up, and to speak up to exchange ideas without having any particular consequences for speaking up. And if there's that fear of consequences, people don't speak up. I mean, you take a look at the average meeting where, you know, okay, a 5-minute meeting ends up being a 45-minute meeting, but no one speaks up because there's that fear of that if I speak up, I'm going to get shut down and my ideas are not going to be welcome or appreciated, which then affects one, getting a lack of buy-in for initiatives being conducted by a team, but introduced by a manager, as well as a lack of productivity in doing that because they don't fully buy in because they haven't been able to properly contribute, or they don't feel safe that they can't contribute. So it really has a huge impact on team dynamics and the productivity of that team. Now, you mentioned earlier conflict. And what's interesting as well in that conflict is that you had mentioned that usually you get contacted after there's been some sort of conflict between a manager and a neurodivergent. And we have seen in the UK and even here in Malta, I'm not too sure about Belgium, it'd be interesting if you have any stats on that, where workplace tribunal cases have gone up with neurodivergence because of this conflict. And so in your workshops, first off, what kind of conflict what kind of conflict are you being informed about? And in your workshops, how do you potentially address in some fashion, if not directly or indirectly, that conflict?
Yeah. So the conflicts we're mostly contacted about is somebody in the team that's neurodivergent, and they are bumping against the barriers of a standard being set in the workplace, and then they have to say, I'm actually neurodivergent towards their manager. And then firstly, the manager is a bit disappointed that they didn't mention it earlier, but which is difficult if there's no psychological safety, of course, and there's stigmas in the team. And then actually they start talking about what the strengths are and the challenges, which should have been a conversation already when the person started, of course, because you don't have to know necessarily a label of somebody. You need to know what their strengths are and the challenges are and their triggers are in the workplace. And then they start to look for a solution. But the manager, they try a lot of things, but they fail because they have no idea how to deal with neurodiversity. And when they address to HR doesn't know either. And they don't get it's not on the agenda, they don't get the budget from the company to foresee like trainings for managers in neurodiversity. And it's mostly the manager who is very inclusive and coaching and facilitating that wants to move on with that and do something for the employees. So they book a workshop on their budget of the team, actually, to improve the situation within the team, but also to learn themselves how to deal with it in a better way, to understand it. And that's what we do in the workshop. We introduce them into neurodiversity, on the practical things that they can do, in the team level, on organizational level, but also on a personal level. And then we let them think about first steps that they can take within the team for the next few months or weeks to get started being more new and inclusive. Of course, a workshop in itself doesn't solve the issue. You also need to do actually guidance with the team as well. But for them, it's already a first step to get also buy-in from their senior leadership, from the board, actually, to move on. Yeah.
And within what you typically see in those workshops, they book the workshop and they expect a sort of session or workshop around how can we work with neurodivergent people, of some sorts. So for example, somebody with ADHD or autism or dyslexia or OCD. But that's not what we provide. We do help with the problem, but we don't provide, so to say, a manual or a guideline. This is how you work with neurodivergent people. It's really about attempting to break the norms that are currently in the workplace. So around what is being professional, what is being productive, all these kinds of things. And then you see them slowly, it's like, you see the awareness growing, and they're like, at the end of the workshop, oh yeah, it's also how we behave. We have, I'm not going to say ableist, but expectations that are unrealistic for a lot of people. And then you see them like, oh yeah, okay.
It's not just a neurodivergent person. We have a responsibility as well.
If we change the design of our workplace and the design of how we work and how we make conversations and how we cooperate, then it can work for everybody.
Yeah, like for example, we had a company where we went to for a keynote. And afterwards, they realized, so the way we communicate with each other also has a big impact. So they started to change their way of communicating in emails, setting clear expectations and so on, checking off with each other. And it really improved the way how they work, because they had less miscommunications.
That's interesting in the aspect, I haven't quite directly, in some ways I haven't quite directly run into this, but it does come up in questions, I guess, after a workshop or during a workshop or a speaking engagement, is how do I deal with somebody has this ADHD? They're looking for that manual, and even if there was a manual, the manual will only fit for that one particular situation, that one particular person, or that one particular environment. But as soon as you start introducing different types of ADHDers or different types of autistic people, the manual will be obsolete because every person's different.
Yeah, indeed. I also learned that apparently Google, in their marketing team, every person has like a profile or a manual about themselves, so that
they compose themselves.
And so that then they share this with colleagues as well, and they have meetings about it every now and then. But in this way, everybody knows, this person communicates this way, or this person has these strengths, so I can go to this person for these kind of things.
And we are actually a good example. Internally, at the big company Bien, We both have diagnosis of ADHD and both of autism,
Yeah.
but we are very different. I work in we've changed over time, and we've come to learn each other's strengths and challenges. But originally I work in a completely different way than Daphne.
Yeah.
And that also is something that we have to learn over time.
It's finding the balance, and that's a bit the fear I have with manuals per person as well. It's not because you have a manual that you can push your manual on everyone in the team as well. You still have to find a balance that works for everyone.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. The individual manual, there's a document that there's a strategy that is being taken upon, particularly with neurodivergent coaches or consultants within the workplace, which is a work with me document.
Mm-hmm.
And it very similar to what you're talking about, just a different name. And it highlights, that I'm, AD autistic. This is how my autism affects me. These are my triggers. These are my strengths. This is how I can add value to the team. And you present that to the team. You present that to the manager, in a sense of they get a better sense of how to work with you more effectively. And you're kind of presenting them that individual manual.
Yeah.
So that manager and the team can become more people-centric, more supportive to that individual.
Yeah, but it should then be the case for everyone, not just neurodivergent.
Yeah, absolutely, totally, 100% agree. And I'm curious because you mentioned something earlier in regards to teams have their own budget. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, sometimes that's the case. Yeah, in some companies.
In some companies, that's interesting. The teams actually have their own budget, so they could invest in as a team aspect in regards to what they want to invest in for training and learning in regards to that team development. That'd be interesting. I think that it adds up that again that extra level of taking it away from the board level HR support and bring it down to the ground level, to the first tier, and say, okay, here's your structure, here's a degree of autonomy, and here's your budget to invest into whatever you see appropriate to develop your team further, particularly in this conversation, of course, neurodiversity, and maybe perhaps provide an option list as well as, 2 or 3 outside of that option list. So that way, again, it adds that structure and autonomy. So,
it depends on the company.
Yeah, it does.
And mostly it's also budgets, related to operational stuff as well, which means that mostly they only have budget for like a workshop, while they might have needs for consulting as well. So it should be a larger budget, or either the consulting should be on the company then, or something.
Or it's a team building.
Yeah, as well.
Provided as you can decide with your team what you want to do for a team building.
Yeah, and then it's like an offsite that they do.
Yeah, and then for companies you can also, instead of doing a regular team building, that's not
really building a team.
That doesn't. You can also book a workshop around neurodiversity.
Or inclusion.
The other aspect. I think the other aspect as well is, I work with bigger companies, I work with smaller companies, and some of the dynamics is that we don't have the resources, and when we talk about smaller companies, that a bigger company has. And speaking with Mark Crowley earlier in regards to when we talked about recruitment, he said that it's the teams, it's smaller businesses who are actually more agile than bigger companies. And if you actually think about it, when you go by your philosophy of, yes, you have to have board buy-in, but then once that board buy-in's there, bring it back to the teams and give the teams the structure, the mandate, the goals, and the budget and the autonomy to be able to do that. Then it's not about size, it's about focusing on the team and allowing the team to do what it needs to do to support the members.
Absolutely. That's the scaling. Eh?
Mhm.
And the scaling is also interesting for innovation.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to innovate in some regards, for example, you're a product company in tech, you want to um, experiment with a new product or with a new kind of feature or offering something specific. I think a very good approach is to say, okay, let's compose a team with all the skills and all the expertise that we need, but that's not too big, not too big of a team, like 8 people or 7 people. And we compose that team and we give them the mandates and we give them a budget to experiment.
Right.
And that's really, I find that terrific. And I think that's the same with, like we were saying, neurodiversity. Yeah.
You often see the image of a big ship putting out speedboats. And actually, in China, they do that quite often. And that's also why they're so innovative at the moment.
So our tendency of companies to keep control of everything is it has a negative effect, because in our world today we need to innovate and we need to be creative, but being in control, that's not possible. You can't experiment, you can't try out things if you are being tied to a rope from above. So
Yeah, what you're talking about there is very interesting, because I'm reading a book, and Simon from earlier on Tuesday, we're talking about education, was talking about the same approach, from a change management perspective, is that companies need to have a two-tier system. You have the management system, which is a proven system of success. But if you just leave just that one system, then that company becomes stagnant. And you see companies like BlackBerry or Nokia that had that had that structure, where because they didn't have that second system, they didn't become innovative, where they basically crashed and burned. And what they're saying is you need to have that second system of networking, where they have that autonomy with, again, structure, parameters, goals, budget, and being flexible to be able to interact with all the different teams. And because they have that second networking stream working in line with the first tier, the management system, they're able to get into, that novelty, that innovation aspect of it. And then slowly, once they have a tested, proven ground, then they can start integrating that into the first tier. All right, which is exactly what you're talking about right there. So it's just change management approach, and there's about in this aspect, there's about 7 to 8 tiers on how to develop that second system. So this brings in then to the next question, because we talked about teams, we talked about onboarding, and there's the aspect of wish you would have told us from the very beginning. Well, if it's not psychologically safe, how can we tell you from the very beginning? And that starts off at recruitment. And during our prep talk, you talked about the aspect of they're very hesitant in recruiting neurodivergence. And both HR and managers complain about employees, as you stated, not disclosing. So how do we respond to this overall resistance and the tendency to place blame on the employee?
Yeah. The thing is, you can't expect people to disclose from the very first moment if there is like research proving that you're actually don't get equal chances.
You're being discriminated against.
For being employed, because there's stigma. And next to that, if we're talking about the neurodiversity paradigm, it also doesn't matter what the labels are, because it's about the strengths that you're hiring, the added value in your company, the cultural add. What does that person add to your company that you don't already have in place, and will make your company even more productive, even more creative, innovative? That's what it's about. And it doesn't matter if that person has ADHD, autism, epilepsy, or whatever from the neurodivergent group, it doesn't matter for the company. Yeah.
But it ties together the expectation of, for example, recruiters or HR managers to they need to know of what is your neurotype or your diagnosis really ties together with we need to know how to deal with that. You need to tell us if you have ADHD. You need to tell us.
They only think about the risks,
Yeah.
not about the benefits.
And also because they think we need to, and they have a responsibility, but they don't, like we said earlier, they don't need to arrange all the accommodations themselves and make amends to those people. You need to go to universal design, but that they don't know yet. So the starting point is still, we need to know if you are neurodivergent. And then we also say, it's the stigma and indeed the risks. But then you also say, but it's 15 to 20% of the world's population that is neurodivergent. That's the estimate. If you are a company of like 100 people, for sure there's neurodivergent people in your company. And because they say, but we don't know about anybody, that nobody disclosed here. But they are there, I'm pretty sure they are there, but people mask and they hide themselves. There's already those talents, those challenges are already in your workplace, but you don't know, and you don't really,
Create an atmosphere for them to talk about it.
And the strengths that are there, the potential that is there is not, it's untapped. So it's the asking for we need to have the disclosure is the wrong question. That's not important.
And also like in the US, in Silicon Valley, they in the past they started hiring, especially on people with autism, for example, because they had the perception that everyone with autism is very accurate and good in IT, which is also stereotypes.
I like to do the same over and over
again. But that's also not what we want, because you hired somebody who's autistic, but you didn't hire somebody because of their strength. You hired them on the label. And what after the recruitment? Does that person get a good onboarding? Is the team ready to be neuro-inclusive?
It creates as Mark said earlier on Monday, it creates this domino effect. If it's not done properly from the very beginning, then you have this domino effect in a negative way. And if it's done properly at the beginning, then you have this domino effect going in a positive way. And so let me ask you this then, because often, the question always comes up as well that, and I'm curious to see how you tackle this, is, well, we're managers. We need to ensure that the job gets done, and we don't have time to be dealing with, somebody's neurodiversity or what other particular problems, as much as they may want to try to tackle it, at the end of the day, they need to fill in the role as a manager. What suggestions do you give to managers to be able to try to balance that out?
First of all, that's short-term thinking, of course. That's because they're under pressure.
Right.
But also, it's not that you have to become inclusive from today on tomorrow. It starts with small steps. The step that you take every day will make sure that, like in a year's time, you've had done a very big change, actually. But that doesn't ask a lot of you as a manager on a daily job, I mean. And also, being a manager myself, I also think, sorry, but that's your job. You have to be working, facilitating the team and looking at the people in the team and how they can work better, that they can be fully productive. If you're not thinking about how you can facilitate everyone in your team and your team as a group to be more productive, then what are you doing?
And the well-being. You need to have the conversations, you need to talk about well-being at work, because that's the core of managing, that's the core of leading teams. I wanted to say something, but I forgot about it.
Well, I absolutely agree with everything you're saying, and I think a lot of managers miss that step. And yeah, it comes down to pressure, but also comes down to the fact that through the whole entire structure of the company, there isn't proper training given to managers, as well as are you hiring managers who have those skills, not just on the technical and project management side, or just because they're good at their job or seniority.
I had to learn that myself. In the past, I was not very good in those regards. And then in the year before I created that talk, EDG developer, I slowly started to grasp, like, oh yeah, okay, if there's a lot of requirements set from the senior management, and this needs to be done, and that needs to be done, and that needs to be done. As a manager, you can't just push everything down onto your people. Yeah, you need to get that done, and that done, and that done, and that done. And also I want to tackle that, and that, and that. And then and then trying to divide all the work in between the people, creating wasteful systems with delays and bottlenecks and whatnot. And it just doesn't work. I also had to learn that myself in the past.
And that's something I saw in the past as well. Often the person being the best at the work gets the promotion, or somebody who's good in politics within the company, but they're not necessarily a leader. And that doesn't mean that they can't become a leader, of course, but they don't get the training for it either from the company.
Yeah.
So I want to move on to an aspect of your workshop, and something that you actually created quite recently, if I recall correctly, regarding you created an intriguing game for the tech industry that addresses the unique challenges neurodivergent individuals face in the workshop. Could you elaborate on how the game works and share the reactions of participants that engaged with it?
Yeah. So the game is a serious game. It's a board game, physical board game that we developed, and the goal of the board game is to teach people in the teams to find a balance between how to tackle the work, the different ways how you can tackle the work, and there's also different ways to engage with each other and to cooperate. So there's all these kinds of ways that you can do that, but in the end, you need to find a balance. And the aspect of finding the balance is translated into a sort of health score. So the game, I will quickly explain the game. The game has 5 personas. So these are fixed personas that we created with a description. It's not real people. And you, as if you play the game with your group, you control these personas. So you make decisions on behalf of these personas. Now, these personas, they each have a score, a health score, keeping track of, are they actually doing well? How is their well-being in the team? Plus, the product or service that they're working on also has a health score, because they need to take care of the product that they're developing. So to play the game is really a series of scenarios, random scenarios. In this case, it's about software development. The game is now targeted to software development teams, like you said. So they get these realistic scenarios. Can be a personal aspect, can be it can be about a people aspect, it can be about the technical aspect, it can be about something went wrong with the product, or we got hacked or whatever. And then they draw that scenario, and then they have a whole table of practices, so that they can deal with that in very, very different ways. Then they have to have the conversation and check, okay, we have these personas, what would be a good approach to tackle that?
Yeah, and every persona also has a different strengths, different characteristics, different preferences, and they don't have a label, so they're not aware about what kind of neurotype this person has. They only know the strengths and the challenges.
Yeah. And then when they have chosen the practice, they first have to choose. Then if they turn around the cards, at the back side of the cards, there's a score change for everybody. So then they see the effects, and then they again see people starting to think and starting to have conversations like, huh? Why does this happen? Oh yeah, but maybe that's because this person is very detailed. Or, oh yeah, okay. And then the conversation started, people started to think, start to get better insight of these personalities and what their needs are, what their needs and their strengths are.
Yeah.
So the goal is really to have the conversations going and to learn that, we can't, and that also connects to the scaling. We can't define one way of working for an entire company. It really depends on the team, and it depends on the people in the team.
Yeah, and if they would opt every time for a practice that's good for most of the team, but bad for one person, they get negative consequences of that as well, because that person falls out of the team, and then everybody's mental health goes back. Because as a team, you have to deal with all this work of this person, being burned out and falling out.
So you have to make sure that everybody stays in the green zone.
Good mental health. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a really interesting design of the game, and a very engaging, interactive of how you've designed it that gets all the participants to start thinking about the health score and how the impact of that health score has on the team, the product, the task, the client that they're serving. That is a very interesting perspective of what you've designed there. And I can really see how people are starting to get engaged with it and starting questioning why that they may have gotten a very bad health score, or if someone has been burnt out and how that affects the whole entire team. It adds a really interesting dynamic. And very good on you, because that sounds like an amazing game that you've developed.
Thank you. So we still need to, we still have the feedback. We got very good feedback in general from people.
Indeed. Yeah, and also a lot of ideas to even improve the awareness of that as a team, that you have to make sure that the team stays in good health, everyone in the team, and that it doesn't become a thing of, we're all in a good health, but that one person is not, so that's a bit of a sucker or a loser, how to say. That's something we're still working on, that doesn't happen.
Technicalities, it's the first time that we tried to create the game, but the goal is to bring it into print later this year. Then to generalize it to other teams, to all kinds of teams.
Interesting. I can see that. I can see that scenario of let's say 4 out of 5 are in good health, but there's that one employee team member who's not. And then comes the issue of, is that being addressed, and how are you going to address it? Because that could lead into a lot of things, very unhealthy, even dangerous behavior that one employee could face. So that's a very good point to bring up, because even though you're in a team, sometimes you operate in a bubble, and in that bubble, you're not thinking about that other person beside you, or the other aspect of it, particularly from a neurodivergent point of view, that's an odd duck, where and then of course, because that person is seen as an odd duck, they get excluded.
And then the pressure, if the team is under pressure, then having to deal with that is like excess. That's an excess. It's like, we can't deal with that. Can't you just go along? And it's like, no.
Right.
And that was actually valuable feedback, I think, and we're redesigning it so that they actually get consequences that the productivity goes down, so the product goes down, but also that it has an impact on the other people as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's a really fantastic game. So Daphne and Dietrich, we've basically concluded our wonderful conversation, and we've covered a lot of ground during our time together. And I'd like to ask you this last question. With everything that we have said and brought forward to our listeners in our conversations, what are 3 key takeaways you want our listeners and viewers to walk away with, should I say?
You're mostly better at
See,
Well,
it's not fair, eh? It's not, we didn't write all answers. No, the first thing, we also always conclude our workshops with that is really about, if you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person.
Right.
That's really, we need to, we state that every time. Yeah, but people with ADHD, and sometimes we say that as well, we also have this some sort of, there's some common traits, but still, and that's why we also say, we both have the same labels, and we are still very different. So it's really important that don't fall into the trap of believing all the stereotypes. Plus, keep on having conversations. You have to ask questions to the people, to the people in your team, to people that candidates that want to work at your company, to everybody. You need to have questions. What do you need? And create a safe space. So don't assume. And that's a hard thing because as people we make assumptions.
Yeah.
That's hard.
And the second one would be, to be future-proof as a company, you need to be inclusive in general as well. But inclusive companies, it has shown from research that they're more innovative, that they're more productive, that they're better at customer satisfaction and also employee satisfaction. So, yeah. And then the third one, I think that will be probably about giving the mandates and the budgets to the teams.
That's the scaling. Create the environment that's it's not creating the environment, it's creating the mandates for teams, the tools and the mandates for teams to create their own ideal environments. So it's descaling, it's trusting people, but also giving people access to tools, budgets, but also, if they need coaching to improve team dynamics or leadership training, all these kinds of things. That's what makes performance teams, in my opinion, and not attaching strings to all the teams and then trying to orchestrate it from above. Sure, you need to set goals and you need to set deadlines and you need to set expectations, but be aware of that. The power, and for some things or for a lot of things, needs to be with the team. And if you set metrics, because we are in a world where a lot of metrics get set, be aware of metrics. Metrics get gained. People game the system. And especially if it's a metric that doesn't really capture value for the business or doesn't capture value for the client. And that's also sometimes that we see in tech environments. There are metrics, but they're like very technical metrics, like sometimes even the amount of change sets that you made in the code base. Like this week you made 3 of them, and other people make 5. That's not good. And then I think, but that person doing 3 change sets was perhaps helping half of the team and brainstorming with them and deblocking them. So that those things don't help. So be aware of that.
And even if you would try to measure the health or the engagement within the team, it will not be truthful if you don't have psychological safety either. Because people won't give honest response.
No.
Well, those are three fantastic key takeaways. And I think I'm going to add I'm not going to add, but I'm going to comment on the aspect of metrics because I completely agree with everything you said. I used to believe in the phrase that if it can't be measured, it can't be managed. But then I learned from reading The Power of Difference how that statement is completely inaccurate and incorrect. And even the person who they say has said the quote actually never said that quote. And in actuality, that quote comes from a paper from the 1950s, where the focus on the paper was on how companies over measure things, in particular things that does damage to the company, and yet they continue to still do it.
Yeah.
And the person that they claimed said something completely different, where the whole point of metrics isn't to measure what's wrong or what's good with the company, and it's not to measure performance. It's actually measured to give feedback to the manager, who could then can turn that, or the employer who can turn that to use that to coach their team to improve on what they've learned from the measurement. That's the point of metrics. And that has gotten lost in how companies behave and how they see metrics.
Indeed. Yeah.
And that's also why we are a bit of a fan of lean management and lean manufacturing practices. So
Well, Daphne and Dietrich, I'm truly impressed by what you have accomplished, and I thank you for sharing your experiences with guiding us all to understanding why it's important to be inclusive to neurodivergent talent within the workplace. Well, listeners, we are on our last leg of an amazing Neurodiversity Week Malta tour, and we have one more interview happening shortly. In fact, in about an hour's time at 12 o'clock. Join me and my guest, Dragan Dunkov, as we discuss the importance of coaching and mentoring for neurodivergent talent within the workplace. Till next time, take a leap and transform.